Okay, we are recording. Welcome everyone to the, what is this, 12th episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And I am delighted to have as my very special guest today, Jake from Man Carrying Thing. Hello, Jake, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I have been watching your videos for quite some time now and enjoying them very much. So I am just very honored and happy to have the chance to talk to you today.
Likewise, I don't know when you started making videos, but I feel like it was around the same time when we both started, or maybe you were a little earlier, I don't know. But
Yeah.
I remember, watching your channel grow, and it's been fun to see. And you just have been a great voice in the BookTube community. So I'm really happy to finally get to actually talk to you.
Well, thank you so much. That's really a great compliment coming from you. And I've enjoyed watching your channel not grow, but explode. And that's really well earned. I mean, you've done some brilliant stuff there. You've given me some good chuckles, especially as a professor watching some of your Zoom skits. Can I call them skits? Is that what they are? That's probably not the right word, but
Yeah, I'd call them that. Yeah.
okay. But it's so uncanny how you nail the Zoom atmosphere so well in those skits. And speaking from the professor side, I just think, oh my God, he understands us so well.
People thought for a while that I was like a professor, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, you must be a teacher." I look older too, so they're like, "Oh, you must be a teacher." I'm like, "No, I'm still in school."
Yeah. Speaking of which, I would like to congratulate you. I did it in writing, but now that you're here, congratulations on finishing the bachelor's. That is
Oh, thanks.
fantastic. That's fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it was kind of like a strange journey to get there. For a while, I didn't think I was ever going to go back to college, so I was happy that I did.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's there are many routes to do it, and not everyone has to do it. Frankly, I think that lots of people have very fulfilling lives. One of my best friends from high school does not have a college education, but he's one of the smartest persons I know. He's a blacksmith, self-educated,
Oh,
brilliant
wow.
guy, totally at peace with himself, somebody I admire deeply. So there are just lots of ways to get to where you want to go. But I think it's fantastic that you have this achievement now, and you're an English major. So yeah, right. I mean, that's very practical.
Yeah, I don't know. What did you major in for your bachelor's?
So okay, now you put me in a position, because as much as I jest about the practicality of being an English major, I was a major in liberal arts, meaning I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no clue. I got to the end of my bachelor's degree,
Mhm.
which, by the way, I did in Washington State, where you live now. And you're in Seattle, but I was closer to Olympia. I'll tell
Oh,
you
okay.
about the hippie school I went to. But actually,
Oh,
I went
okay.
to a community college my first 2 years. And then I moved on to the Evergreen State College, where they have no grades and where there's a lot of really cool uh, blending of what would be in many other institutions, very siloed departments. And where a lot of it can be very self-guided. For example, my senior year, the whole time I learned Old English and Old Norse my senior year. Now that is practical, right?
Right.
So
Oh, that's very useful, especially
yeah.
for, yeah, but I mean, it's fascinating. I don't know. I love that. Like, I think people should do like impractical majors sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to have like it's good to have the degree, I feel like. And that was another thing, because I wasn't sure about like what major I was going to do either. And I kind of
Yeah.
jumped around, and I was like, you know what? I just need to do something just so I can have my degree.
Yep. Yep. But it's a good one, I think, because being able to read a lot of literature and being taught, being encouraged to analyze it, I think is great preparation for so many aspects of life and for being a well-rounded citizen. So being somebody who's curious about other lives and somebody who is capable of sort of peering inside a little bit and saying, okay, what makes me tick here? So it's actually applicable to way more than I think perhaps a lot of people might think. There are actually a lot of businesses I know that have nothing to do with literature seek out people who are, philosophy majors or English majors, because they think differently and they've learned critical thinking at a level that most people probably don't. So it's a very valuable thing. It's a very valuable pursuit. And even if you don't have an immediate, like practical, visible career stemming from being an English major, it's taught you a lot of things you may not even realize yet, I think. And it's prepared you for so many realms of life, I think. I don't know how you feel at this point, but I believe that to be true.
I think that's definitely true. I think there's a lot of truth in that because, writing so many papers all the time and, having to just figure your way around a text, get to the meaning of it, and do it quickly and do it like with language that isn't super bloated and complicated. It's just like having those writing skills is super useful. And especially for me, I want to be, a full-time writer one day, so that's like,
Brilliant.
that's
Yeah.
a huge, that's a great thing. And it came down to me ultimately, like I couldn't imagine doing any other kind of work at university because so much of it is boring and dull. And at least with English, I got to read some good books in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's another thing we have in common is I want to be a writer someday. And I've been working on it for a while.
Well, you are. I mean, you have your novel that I've heard others talking about. That's very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I have actually a complete trilogy at this point, and
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I have an agent who like a week ago did a pitch where he submitted it to a bunch of editors at publishing houses. So I'm just kind of like, I mean, it's fantastic, but I'm also sort of like perpetually nervous at the moment. So, I mean, in a good way, I guess, but we shall see what happens with that,
How long does that process take, once your agent pitches it and stuff?
Yeah, so I'd like to give you a very wise answer to that question, but the truth is I have no clue.
I guess you'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll find out. I would imagine that they would need some time to read, if they actually read the novel. Actually, he's given them 2 of the novels. So they would probably need, I think, at least a week or more really to read those. Plus there's some other supporting material. So yeah, it's a process. It really is. I mean, to get to this point, I've worked hard and I've jumped over a ton of hurdles to get where I am. And of course, as we were saying before, doing all that reading, it's going to serve you well as a writer. All that stuff you read is going to come out in your books and you won't even realize it. Mm-hmm. It's going to come out in your stories and in ways that you can't even begin to anticipate.
That's so true.
It's part of you. You are what you read. You are what you read, really, in so many ways.
Absolutely. I even feel like I can't write if I'm not like reading something, like in the same day or constantly reading, or if I'm not reading a book for like a while, I have like a dry spell. Mm-hmm. I have a really hard time writing because it's like those words, they're just like filtered through you, and just the language you get kind of, I don't know, you kind of need it in your head at all times, I think. But
I agree.
I mean, it's so true what you say about like everything you've read really feeds into your writing. Sometimes I just feel like we're just like recycling machines or something, just kind of like gathering all of our favorite things and just kind of reconfiguring them.
We are, and there's good ways to do that, and there are less good ways to do that. So, when we see it done well, we praise something for engaging with influences. But if we see it done not so well, we might refer to it as being derivative from said influences. So I think there is a distinction there, although where you draw the line might be different. But I'm very curious about what sort of books you might be writing someday. Do you know yet?
It's tough to say because I have like a lot of different types of influences and loves and stuff I want to write. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't know if you have like a specific style that you feel drawn towards and that you are a part of, but I feel like drawn towards a lot of different styles. I like writing very I, I love writers who can jump around styles. I think one
Uh-huh.
example of mine, who's one of my favorite writers, is Donald Westlake,
Uh-huh.
the crime writer who wrote as Richard Stark and just wrote these brutal, tough crime novels. And then he wrote as his own name. And he just used all these pen names so that he could write in different ways. And I love that
Cool.
because whenever I find myself writing, it's usually um, a bunch of different stuff. But then again, I don't know, if someone read it, maybe they'd be like, hey, this sounds like you. So I don't know. But
Yeah.
that's kind of how I see it. Although right now I'm working on like a longer horror novel. So
Oh, cool. Very cool. Nice. Yeah. I think it varies from writer to writer, would be my sense, that some writers really have a voice and they stick with that voice pretty closely. Fewer writers, this is a gut feeling, so I could be wrong, but I would guess that fewer writers are as skilled at changing that voice and doing different things. But it could be adventurous and fun, to do something like that. So I think it's a good way to keep things fresh as well. So I think it's and you're figuring it all out, and you're doing everything right, in my opinion, right now, because you're reading a lot and you're writing already, and you have this great platform that is a means by which people kind of, I'm sure a lot of your subscribers and viewers will be very interested in what you're writing. So that's just, you're doing a whole bunch of things right at this point. I wish I was that smart when I was your age.
I feel like I just stumbled, into doing this. It really was just kind of like a random, thing that happened. But, like you said, I kind of feel like I'm still in like a training stage and a learning stage for
Yeah.
writing. I feel like I don't know when I'd want to show my work, to others, or try to publish it or something like that, because I'm just right now having kind of the time and headspace to get to really work on it and say like,
Yeah.
hey, I actually have a little bit of time when I can actually work on it and put a lot of focus into it, which has been a huge goal of mine. So I'm
Yeah.
excited about that. And like you said, like what there are, I do feel like there are people who watch my channel who will be interested to see what I write.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like your platform is so primed for that, because you talk so extensively about fantasy and you have so many dedicated viewers who are so interested in what you have to say about fantasy and your own writing. So I'm very excited to see your book. I know others will
Oh.
be.
Well, thanks so much, Jake. I really appreciate that. It's kind of a humbling experience for a guy who is not very knowledgeable about social media at all. I'm like twice your age. I'm more than twice your age. So I have a kid your age, actually. So and not that people 50 years old can't be good at social media and stuff, but I had a lot of learning to do. And I didn't realize what a wonderful community existed out there with all these people. I was hoping to find people with a common passion, which is fantasy for me. I love literature. I'm a medievalist in my day job, and I teach intro to lit, where I teach a broad array of literature. But fantasy is kind of my passion, really, and it's something that I've always thought I would like to do, to write, and I've always been a student of, and I'm always learning. I'm still learning. Like you said, learning is something that never stops, and that keeps life interesting. So. But I was so delighted to find myself part of this community that where people are just nice. Yes, I mean there are some people who are out there to be trolls, but they're very few in comparison to the vast majority of really kind, generous people out there. So yeah.
It's so true, especially like BookTube. And the thing I feel like with social media, especially YouTube, is if you're putting out positivity and your kind of content is very positive and just a welcoming environment, you're going to get that feedback, as
Yeah.
that it's going to be sent back to you. And I think there's just a really good environment here for the most part.
Yeah.
And even like when I go outside of BookTube genres and just the comedy short skits, whatever, like I still find that people are pretty nice
Yeah.
in general. You know, you get, like you said, you kind of get the bad comments every now and then, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's just how it is.
That's how it is. I think you have to develop a bit of a thick skin, I think. And that's probably a good lesson for both of us if we manage to publish books, because people will say mean things about our writing too. You can pretty much guarantee that. But that's, yeah, it's good. It's really a wonderful thing, I think, this platform and this opportunity to engage with so many people and meet some really kind folks. But we were talking about a book that was important to you a moment ago. And one of my standard questions for folks when they come on Dear Dr. Fantasy is to bother them about their their reading journey, I guess is one way I put it. But what were some of the important reads for you, going back to, little Jake, going back to when you were a wee lad, or as far back as you like, but up to the present? What have been some of the formative reads and stories for you that would explain to somebody who you are today?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh man. I mean, I guess if I'm going really far back, like I read a lot when I was little. I read a lot of Roald Dahl. I loved
Cool.
just like that dark humor. That was, I still think Roald Dahl is great.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I read that, but like pretty early on, I was really interested in like classics. I don't know why from that age, I was like, I need to read like the serious books. I need to read the big books. Everyone else is reading Harry Potter. I need to read Moby Dick,
You're an old soul, in other words.
or just, pretentious for my age. I was like, I gotta do this. Yeah. And I fell in love with like classic sci-fi, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and
Nice.
War of the Worlds. And so I was really into that kind of stuff. Then in college, when I first started college, I wasn't reading as much. I was studying film, and I was
cool. Okay.
huge into film. Like that consumed my life all in high school. And when I first started college, it was all I thought about or did. I directed a film in high school, like a feature film.
Wow.
Like all throughout high school. That was like my passion project that I like dragged all my friends to do every weekend.
Is this going to be available on your channel at any point?
No, never. Never. I don't know. Yeah, but it was a big deal for me. That was kind of like what I would throw all of my passions into. So I guess like I was always like making videos and really into that, but I kind of lost my love of reading in high school and stuff. And it came back to me later on. And I think a big part of it was like BookTube, and watching, channels like Daniel Green and Murphy and
sure.
And finding new stuff to read and kind of falling in love with the stuff I read as a kid and that kind of nostalgic feel of like, oh, I love fantasy. Why am I not reading fantasy? Like I can read fantasy, I can read sci-fi, I can do all this stuff. And yeah, so I guess that's more or less my reading journey.
Cool. Yeah, that's very cool. So who would you describe as some of your, I think I know some of the answers, but you might surprise me. Who would you describe as some of your favorite current fantasy authors?
Man. I mean, I would say Sanderson, for sure. I mean, the thing is, I'm not as well versed in modern fantasy as most people. And I feel like that's something maybe people don't understand, is that when I started the channel, that was really when I started exploring fantasy.
Yeah.
But I've been very lucky to read in that genre more and more, just kind of as the pressure of like, hey, you got to read this, you got to read this. But Sanderson, I love Le Guin and
oh, beautiful. Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. I recently got the Blade itself, which
cool.
Have you read Abercrombie?
I've read everything First Law. Yeah. So all 10 books. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan. He's sort of like a top 5 author for me. Yeah. A big fan. I think you would probably enjoy, you've probably been told this like 8,000 times already, but I suspect that you would enjoy First Law a lot. Abercrombie, I'll just go ahead and say he has the most brilliant humor of any author in the entire genre of fantasy. I think he's just hysterical, and which is what really, to me, makes his books readable, because they are really, really grim books. They are, the sense I have always of reading a first law book is just profound alienation, which is, it's a very modern condition in some ways, but I think it's something that has affected human beings since time immemorial. But Abercrombie just gets this sense of alienation across in his books consistently and brilliantly. And they would be so hard to read and so depressing if he weren't so damn funny as well. I mean, he is just hysterical. So there are these characters who are just so brutally messed up and so alone and so just lost.
I mean, I hear all the time, like, oh, Jake, you'd love First Law. You got to read First Law.
Yeah.
And I think there's a point where it's like, I'm a little scared because I'm like, I have these really high expectations. I'm like, okay, this is going to be so great. I need to read it, but I'm also like,
hate it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't like, what if it's not as good as I hope, but I just need to get into it, I think, and just start.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I would predict that you'll enjoy Abercrombie's writing. He's a brilliant guy. So yeah, 100%. I think that's a, I mean, I could be wrong. I'm never too sure of myself with these things, but I would predict that you'll like it. And go into it with, the expectation that everyone's probably also told you that, oh, by the way, the first book doesn't have a plot. It's just, you're just meeting a bunch of really interesting characters. So that's a slight exaggeration about no plot, but it wasn't the priority. I think there was a lot of.
I'm fine with no plot. I'm like, I'm all good. Like no plot, like I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it has good atmosphere and like a good writing style, then I'll definitely read it.
Yeah, I think you're going to enjoy it then, because what Abercrombie's really good at is giving every character a very distinct voice. So much so that I have this thing where I've called it the dialogue test, and other people have called it, I'm sure, other things, but I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of this by any means, but what I've called it over the years is the dialogue test. And if you flip open the book and you see some dialogue, and you can know who that character is without any identification, without any markers, that's Abercrombie. I mean, his characters are so distinct that I think more than any other author, he would pass that dialogue test in fantasy. He's very good at giving his characters a distinct voice. That he does this technique where it's not just the dialogue, it's the narrative voice tends to mimic the persona of the POV. So you'll know if you're in a more north, you'll know what this means later, but if you'll know if the character's from the north, or you'll know if the character's from Adua, just by the way the narrator is talking to you. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds very much like, I don't know if Abercrombie has talked about Elmore Leonard. I know Abercrombie has a ton of influences and stuff, but that's very Elmore Leonard, who, I mean, let's see, what am I reading right now? Well, I'm reading this right now. So this is Brava, Elmore Leonard. But yeah, I love dialogue is super important to me. I love the sound of dialogue. I love it when a writer gets dialogue right.
Yeah, I could see that from I keep calling them skits, but
they are. They're totally skits. It's also,
no, they're brilliant, and a lot of the brilliance there is the dialogue, right? I mean, and that's probably something, as somebody who's interested in screenwriting, that you'd have to be really, I think, passionate about, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love screenwriting too, and I feel like in my mind, I don't really divide like screenwriting from prose writing. To me, it feels like one and the same, and I'm very interested in it. I'm like obsessive about it, and I like dialogue, and I like just listening to people talk, and I'll read a book of just all dialogue. That's fine for me.
Yeah.
As long as like you said, as long as it's distinct. And I think that's what I'm really interested in seeing, like how few words can be used to convey so much information.
Yeah. That's a skill. That's a skill that you have to hone that, So yeah, Abercrombie's brilliant at it, because you won't find, and you won't, there's a lot of action and there's dialogue, and you won't find much exposition at all in First Law, which is, I think that's the order of the day. People are less keen on description and exposition, and they really want faster, plots these days than was formed. If you compare like reading Lord of the Rings, which is that's what I grew up reading. That's a huge influence in me. That's just, I mean, if you want to explain Philip Chase, then probably you should just go to Lord of the Rings. But you compare it to, say, Abercrombie, who is a more popular modern fantasy writer, and there's just a lot less exposition and description. So yeah, I mean, that's just the way things are now. And I think a lot of that is the influence of stories on screens. I think that, yeah, that's huge, really.
That's so true. Well, I also kind of feel like that's a loss as well in some ways. I mean, while there's a gain in seeing less exposition, more action heavy fantasy, I think it's great to have. And I think it's a very fun trend. There is a part of me that's sometimes it's not, it loses the atmosphere. It loses the pace that gets us to connect with the characters. And I feel like I see this in certain writing that it's so focused on moving to the next beat. It's so focused on keeping like I can't let you be bored for any second. We got to keep going, and just you kind of feel this anxiety behind the page that's like, if I don't keep you moving, you're going to not read anymore. And it's almost like a digital age kind of thing. I think, we're just so, and like, you make videos, how like you're looking at retention, like how long are people watching? When do they stop watching? And when we think of books that way, I think it becomes a little bit bad for the writing sometimes. And maybe I'm speaking just from personal experience of my own writing, because I've had phases where I'm like, oh, I need to write like this. I have to keep the story flowing exactly this way, when a lot of times readers are, I think, more patient than we give them credit for.
I think you're right. I absolutely agree with you. And for me, reading more modern fantasy has been an adjustment, one that I haven't made entirely, because I will read some popular modern books that are very action oriented, and I feel there's a sparseness to them. Not that they're bad writing or anything, but there's a sparseness there that, for me, I want quiet moments, especially with the characters, because it's the quiet moments that help me to feel connected to the character. And then when something perilous happens to that character, I think I feel that more keenly than if it's just been action. I'm just expecting more action. I need these valleys to get comfortable with this character and feel like I know this person, that I'm identifying, I'm being immersed in this place as well. So for me, I'm with you all the way. I definitely believe that I don't know how things would go back. You can never really go back anyway.
I'm honestly I'm very curious about your own writing process with your trilogy, and how publishing trends today have influenced it, or, like, what has your experience been with that? I'm really curious.
Yeah. Okay. So I will try to be brief.
Please. I'm genuinely very interested in like your writing, how you wrote this trilogy. I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm kind of insane. And I started out doing this 18 years ago. And I did start out with a style. I mentioned Tolkien before. I started out with a style that was probably much closer to Tolkien's than what I have now. And gradually saying to myself, because when I was a kid, I was 12 years old, I read Lord of the Rings, and it just blew my mind away. And it's a story that still makes me cry every time I read, in multiple places. But the ending is like, I just feel there's a sublimity to it that I find so pure and so beautiful. And so I wanted to do that. I said to myself as a kid, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. I want to give that to people, what Tolkien did for me. So what did I do? I went to college and learned Old English and Old Norse, and I went to graduate school and studied medieval literature, because that's what Tolkien did, right? Which might not be the smartest way to go about becoming a modern fantasy writer, but that's what I did. So I really grounded myself in old stuff. And I don't regret it. I took the scenic route to doing this because then I said to myself, maybe I should read more modern fantasy to see what people are buying now. So I started, I think, with probably with Song of Ice and Fire. Before it was probably 2 or 3 books in, and then I went out from there. I read Wheel of Time. I read Abercrombie First Law. Ursula Le Guin was another big influence for me earlier. So that she and Tolkien are the 2 biggest from my earlier days. But I really had to figure out, okay, because Ursula Le Guin is also an older writer. So I really had to figure out modern fantasy. So I've been just sort of catching up in that sense too, like you. I didn't start out necessarily having read everything, not even close to what I feel like I should read to legitimately claim. I didn't give myself the nickname, but somebody gave me the nickname Dr. Fantasy. So, I feel a little bit like a sham because I haven't read all the fantasy there is, but yeah, so I did then say to myself, okay, I don't think people are going to dig this. People are going to get bored with all my description and exposition and my world building that I thought I had to put in there because that's what Tolkien did. And it's brilliant what Tolkien did, but things have changed. So I did pare that stuff down. And I'm glad because I do think over the process of revising, I don't even know how many times now I've been revising these books, and then eventually working with A.P. Canavan, whose channel is A Critical Dragon, who also is a brilliant editor. He's a developmental editor, fantastic guy. I would advise anyone who wants to be a writer to work with, and it is very expensive, unfortunately, but these people have to make a living too. So, but to engage with a developmental editor, if you're really serious about writing, I think it's a good idea, even though it's very, very expensive, because they can really help you to make your story better. And even when I thought, okay, I've pared this down, this is sleek, this is good, strong, action-oriented, fantasy, he found ways I could make it better. There were moments where he said, you're front loading too much at the beginning of this chapter and it's going to bore your reader. You've got one person here who's like thinking for 3-4 pages. Why don't you put another person in there with that person and you can have some dialogue in there and still get the same effect you're going for? And I was like, oh, wait, you're right. And this is a stronger book now because of stuff like that. So it's a process of 18 years of puttering. So yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, I think that's great. And I love what you said about the editing process and the revising process. And even like something as small as that, just like having some dialogue there in the beginning, it kind of amazes me. Like the more and more I work on writing and learn more about it and do like workshops and stuff, the more I realize like so much of it is just like craft that anyone can learn, just like really simple, just like there are ways that can just like make it easier to read. And I think there's so much craft in it. And I think we like mythologize the writing process so much as like this thing we have to connect and be, go to our higher spirits and just like have this mystical experience. And it's like, give me a break. Like, no, like most like, and also people who just kind of focus on the ideas, because I think that, yeah, it's just mostly, the craft elements. And I think it's fantastic that you were able though to develop your world and world building for your books. And I'm curious if you feel like you have a richer book and because of that, and how there's a feeling of like there's something really deep under the pages. Because I think sometimes newer fantasy, it feels like, okay, this is entertaining, but there's not really much depth under it.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You just said a ton of things that I agree with so much. And one of the things you talked about is the craft. I think you have to have a lot of humility too. You have to have, it's weird because you have to be humble, but proud at the same time. Humble enough to listen to people when they're trying to help you make your writing better. You don't always have to take suggestions, but you have to be humble enough to listen, but proud enough to put your stuff out there, because that's scary. You know, it's like walking around naked, you know, you're putting yourself out there in your writing. So there's that. But you asked about the world building and that sort of thing. And I do think that I'm very glad that I took so many years, not only to read older works of literature, to learn Old English and Old Norse and Welsh and other languages, but also to live different places. And that was a key thing for me. And I know that it's not something that everyone can afford to do. I was a very poor graduate student when I did it, but I did it on a very tiny budget, on about $100 a month. I lived in Nepal when I finished my master's degree, and I taught at Tribhuvan University in Kathmandu for a year there. And that was one of my most important experiences of my life, was living in Nepal, learning. I don't speak Nepali really well, but I speak it enough to have a, you know, conversation with a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, and to find the bathroom and all that, and you know, basic functions. But it was just a profoundly life-changing experience for me, because I had the privilege of knowing not only so many beautiful people over there, but also getting a perspective that in many ways was similar to my own, but differed from my own. And that shed a lot of light for me on my own perspective, my own background, my own worldview. And that is something that I think is so valuable for a writer to have, to be able to inhabit other perspectives is so key to what we're trying to do, I think. So living in Nepal did that for me. And I had lived other places too growing up, but this was as an adult, and it challenged me in so many really important ways that I can't even begin to explain it. But it certainly informed my writing, and in very direct ways, because there is a kind of culture, I guess, in my books that is vaguely based on a sort of South Asian vibe, I guess. But more importantly, it's more like what I was trying to say. It gave me the idea, and this probably is something that is big in my books too, is coming to know other perspectives, other cultures. And so, yeah, that's definitely something I would highly recommend for somebody who wants to write, is if you can travel, you know, get out there and try to understand lots of people, you know.
Especially with fantasy writing, I imagine that's got to be so key, just immersing yourself in another culture to see what it's even like, you know, when you're just part of one culture your whole life and you don't get to see, you know, all of it, you know, all at once. I guess that's probably you know, a huge deal. And you know, I for a while I was working on a fantasy novel, and I was finding it so difficult because you're constantly inventing. Like it's while there is like a freedom where you're not having to do like specific research about like, hey, what was this brand of gun safe in 1972 or whatever, you know, like you don't have to worry about that. It's just constantly inventing stuff and understanding like what comes together to make a culture work, what comes together. Like there's just so much. There's so much research. Like there's so much research that goes into a fantasy book. It's insane. And so like, it's a lot. And I commend you for writing in that genre, because as much as I love the genre, I don't know when I'll return to writing in it, you know?
Yeah, there's a freedom in that it allows you to be inventive, to make up stuff. But there's also a burden in the sense that you have to make it believable. You have to, you know, you can't just pluck stuff directly from our world and try to describe it. You have a sort of obligation to transport someone to another realm, which has its advantages too, because you get a kind of psychic distance from our own world, and you can explore, I think, some pretty tough themes that way, without upsetting people, let's say, you know. So if you want to explore, just for example, the trauma of war, you know, you could do that in a novel about a real war here in our world, or you could do it in a fantasy setting. And in some ways, I think the fantasy setting has maybe some advantages in that it allows that psychic distance. It gives you the opportunity to wrestle with these struggles without feeling the direct pain of them, I suppose. I mean, if you've done your job well, it's going to be painful anyway, because people are going to be identifying with your characters and whatnot. But I do think it helps you in a more neutral way, at least, to engage with stuff like that. But
yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's especially for dealing with like sociological issues, looking at how, I mean, I love the big scale, like seeing everything from like a bird's eye view and seeing so much happening all at once, which is why I feel like I'm very drawn to read Malazan, but I don't know when I'll get around to it, but that's the impression I get from it. It's like, or Malazan, sorry.
Oh, I'm fine either way. Stephen Erickson is too, by the way. I apologized to him once, the first time I ever talked to him. I said, dude, I'm so sorry for saying Malazan, and I know it's Malazan now, and I just want, he was like, it's okay, really, it's fine.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I mean, that's a series like I really want to read as well. Kind of like Abercrombie, I'm like putting it off because I'm like, I have it on my shelf, you know. I'm like, when will I actually start reading it?
Cool. I think it would be a profound experience for you. Malazan is, and not just Stephen Erickson's contributions to that world, but also Ian Esselmont's. So when you put them all together, they're getting close to like 30 books now.
Oh my God.
In that world. Yeah. So it's huge. I mean, probably it's not good to think of it all at once, but it is the most profound literary journey I've ever been on, to explore these two writers' works. And that is including my own dissertation, my PhD dissertation. That is including anything else I've ever read, to the extent that I have said that for me, what I said in my one of my videos is that for me, Tolkien baptized my imagination, and Malazan has freed it. And for me, what that means is that Tolkien really showed us what fantasy was, what it could be at that time. But for me, Malazan is pointing the way to the future of fantasy and what we can do in this amazing genre, which is, I'm just so excited about it because it is becoming more and more diverse. We're getting a lot of different voices. It's becoming more enriched by all these voices. And Malazan is, I think it's a series where the two authors have deliberately challenged our assumptions about fantasy, about the world we live in. And they want us to think. They're not telling us what to think. They're asking us to think about these things, about our, you don't get, for example, a hero. You don't get a protagonist. You don't even get a group of protagonists. The view that you get of humanity, to me, in Malazan, is about the truest view you could have of our place in the universe. It's there's no one person who's going to save the world, right? And the opportunities, though, are there for us to connect with other people, especially maybe people that we think of as foreign and different and other. And that is something that they get across beautifully with this emphasis on compassion in the series. So, and I just think it's incredible. Probably, best to take it one bit at a time, though, and take your time with it if you do decide to read the books.
Wow. Well, I think that's a pretty great pitch for reading it. I might have to start sooner than I expected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anytime you want to talk about Malazan, I would be happy to chat with you. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'll do Malazan discussions all the time. Who knows? I mean, I'm very excited. I mean, part of like why I'm excited to be done with school, especially right now, is that I can, like, my TBR's freed up and I can read finally a lot of stuff I've been wanting to do.
Neat.
There's a video that I'm working on, which I don't know how it's going to go. Maybe I'll ask your advice on it, but it's going
Okay.
to be reading. I got a list of the most disturbing books that my subscribers could come up with.
Nice. Yeah, I think
If
I
they
saw that
commented,
post.
all
Yeah.
these books. So, and I went through them and I picked them out, and I'm like, you know what? Why not just torture myself and see how it goes? I'm really nervous because I don't read a lot of dark books. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know. That could be. I remember reading, for example, Crime and Punishment when I was in high school by Dostoevsky,
Mhm.
and feeling depressed for a few weeks afterwards.
Uh-huh.
It was a very impactful book for me at that age. It probably
Yeah.
would be again if I read it, but sometimes those
Right.
tough reads are good for us in a way. But we probably need some more lighthearted stuff as well.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
keep to keep a balance, I guess. But yeah, that sounds like quite a project, really.
I don't know why it just sounded like, yeah, I like, it'll just be amusing for people to watch me get the suffer, like I think, and I like, because I imagine myself watching it and going, yeah, it'd be fun to watch someone else do that, so.
Yeah, absolutely. One I could suggest to you would be Mark Lawrence's Broken Empire trilogy, if you haven't read that yet.
Oh, I've heard about it. Yeah.
Mark Lawrence, by the way, is another favorite author of mine, and he's absolutely brilliant. But what he's done in Broken Empire, which is really his only grimdark trilogy, the rest are not grimdark, but he's made the villain the protagonist. And the villain does some profoundly horrible things. And yet, somehow, Mark Lawrence has me thinking by the end of this trilogy about questions like, well, what would I be doing if I were in this person's place? And I don't know the answer necessarily to that. And he had me really thinking about things like trauma, and not that he's ever excusing what this person does, because he doesn't. There are some pretty awful consequences, but he's a brilliant writer, and so it's a trilogy that, while it might be disturbing to read, I think is one that, and hopefully you get a lot of those suggestions too, where it's hard to read, but it makes you think about some important things.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's what's valuable about like literature, in a lot of ways.
Yep.
You can go to those dark places and you're still safe. You can go explore and see and have some disturbing experiences. And it's some great questions. One of my favorite books is Blood Meridian.
Oh yeah. Cormac McCarthy, right?
Yeah, and that's extremely dark and depressing. But
yeah. Does he write anything other than dark and depressing?
No, I don't think so. I'd love for him to just like write like a fun rom-com, I think that'd be great.
That would be hysterical. You could make a video on that, actually, I'm sure. Cormac McCarthy writing a rom-com. But I've only read The Road, and I've heard that Blood Meridian is actually even more grim than The Road, but I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Well, I'm going to read I haven't read The Road. I've read
okay.
All the Pretty Horses. I've read a few, but I haven't read The Road. So I'm going to do that in this video. I'm going to read The Road. I'm going to read, what others? House of Leaves.
Okay.
I have to look at my list, but yeah, there's some disturbing ones. There's ones on there that I'm legit. I don't know if I'll be able to finish. So
yeah. Yeah, but like you said, I think that it is important for literature to deal with the tough stuff, and especially in a responsible way. Obviously, you don't want to present something as titillating or anything like that. I think it's an author's responsibility, if you're going to engage with something that is difficult, that you deal with the consequences, that you follow up, that it isn't just a kind of a voyeuristic thing where you're just showing, ooh, look at that, and then dropping it. I feel that it's very important for an author to deal with it responsibly, if you're going to deal with stuff like that. You certainly see that in Malazan. There are some very tough stuff. There's a lot of tough stuff in Malazan. But Stephen Erickson and Ines Amont are very, I feel, responsible in terms of following up on those difficult things. So, and I would guess that most of the books that you're getting suggested to read are of that nature. So
I hope so.
But maybe you'll just have to get out something more lighthearted in the midst of that to relieve yourself from all that pain and misery and suffering.
I'll read some Terry Pratchett afterwards.
Brilliant. Yeah, that would be a good cure for all that. You would definitely deserve that. So one thing we discovered before we started recording, and I mentioned Nepal earlier and how I lived there, and I did not know this until we just sort of started chatting with each other, but we are both married to a person from Nepal, which I did not realize. I've seen, of course, your partner in many of your videos. And in fact, she has her own channel now, right? Woman Carrying Man.
Yeah. Me and Nadia, we talk about film and TV on Woman Carrying Man, and
yeah. But I didn't know that she has a Nepali background. So that is so cool. I lived in Nepal, and during that time met the woman who would become my wife. And we've been together. She'll kill me for saying this, but we've been together for more than 25 years now. So
congratulations. That's
thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, but I didn't realize we had that thing in common. And so one of the best things I can tell you in the whole world is to be the son-in-law of a Nepali family.
That is so true.
Right? You've discovered this, right? Yeah.
I mean, Nadia's family is, they're great. My mother-in-law is great. My father-in-law, they're very welcoming, very, very sweet, very loving, and have the best food. The best food.
I agree. I eat it every day.
Yeah.
So I have basically a very South Asian diet, and which works well because I've been a vegetarian for a while. So it works really well.
I'm vegetarian as well.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, we have a ton of things in common here. So yeah, I love South Asian food, and the culture over there is just so beautiful, and the people, just so many wonderful people who have become so dear to me. But I did have a lot of learning to do when I first got there. I probably should have done more homework before arriving, because I was fairly ignorant of a lot of things. For example, food. I love the food now, and I eat it every day. But when I got there, I didn't understand when I was a guest in somebody's house. So it's a much more high context culture. We Americans tend to be more low context. So when I went to a Nepali household as a guest, they would serve, as you probably know, they serve a lot of food. And they would fill up my plate, and I would say, oh, wow, that's a lot of food. And yeah, they want to treat me well. And so I grew up very disciplined about food, where it was very important for us to eat all the food on our plate. And so I do that. I'd eat all the food, even if I was kind of full. I'd finish it off, and I'd be like, oh, okay, good. And I'd compliment them. Wow, that was great. Thank you. And they say, oh, you want some more? And I'd say, oh, no, thanks. I'm full. Boom, I'd get more rice on my plate, right? And I was like, wait, I just said no. Okay, because I was, raised to eat all the food. I'd be, oh, okay. And I'd eat the rest of what was on my plate. Go, okay, thank you. That was great. Oh, would you like some more? No, really, I'm full. Boom. And then I was like, oh no, what do I do? So it took me, I'm a little slow. It took me forever to figure out that if I don't want more food, I need to be more insistent. I need to, I can cover the plate with my hands, and say, no, I'm really full. No, please, or take the plate away, or, you have to be more insistent. And it works in reverse too. I had a good friend from Nepal who came here and went to an American household for the first time for a Thanksgiving meal. And like a polite Nepali, when he was asked, would you like some more? He said, oh, no, really, I'm fine. And the correct Nepali response is, "Oh no, have some more." And they shove the food on your plate. Well, my friend gave the Nepali response, said, "No, I'm full. It's okay." And they said, "Okay." And they put the food away, and he was still very hungry.
Still hungry.
Yeah. So,
That's very relatable. And yeah, I remember the first time I ate at our family's house, first time I had dinner with them, they fantastic food, but yeah, like I was very full, and just like, oh no, I'm good. I mean, it's so good, and I love it. It's fantastic. Then have more. Yeah, but I'm gonna die. I'm so full. And I was like, it was like a week, but I was like, yeah, I think I gained like 20 pounds this week. So especially now that we live, right by them. We're in Washington now. I have to be a little more careful with my diet, or else I'm gonna just be eating, mama every day, and like, oh my God. Yeah.
Well, do you eat at home the basic like dal bhat tarkari kind of thing, or?
Oh yeah, we eat that. I mean, we eat all sorts of stuff, but her mom is just amazing at cooking all sorts of stuff, and she'll just bring stuff over, just like, oh, you guys need to eat food. I'm like, it's okay. Oh, yeah. We were at the store. No. I made food. I'm bringing it over.
That's mommy love right there.
Yeah. It's very sweet. And and we just moved here about a month ago. So it's been wonderful getting to eat Nepali food again. So
cool. Good for you. Yeah. How are you liking Seattle? I went to Seattle quite a few times while I lived in Washington State, but that was back in the mid 90s. So actually early 90s. So yeah, I was there from 90 to 94. I imagine it's changed, although I do visit once in a while. I was last there in 2017. I went to Seattle, went to the Chihuly Museum, the one with all the glass and stuff. That's really cool. It's right near the Space Needle.
Oh, okay.
I highly recommend it if you haven't been there yet.
Yeah, no, I'm still so new. There's so much I haven't done or seen. I mean, we're not right in Seattle. We're like, we're near Puyallup.
Puyallup. Yeah. Yep, I know that area.
I just say Seattle because no one knows any of these names.
Actually, Puyallup is closer to where I was. So I lived at one point, though I went to school near Olympia, I started out closer to Tacoma and not very far from Puyallup, actually. I mean, but anyway, yeah.
But I mean, it's been great so far. I mean, I have a cruel wake up call, I'm sure, in the winter, because I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, okay.
I've been living in LA for the past 5 years, so it's
dry places.
Yeah, nice and dry and warm, and right now, and it's fantastic weather here.
Summer is bone dry in Washington. Yeah,
it's beautiful, and so I'm a little nervous about the winter, but yeah.
Well, that's what makes all those rainforests look so good, right? I mean,
otherwise, yeah, exactly.
Have you been out to the Olympic Peninsula yet?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I profoundly recommend that one. So yeah, to the temperate rainforests out on the Olympic Peninsula, such beautiful trees and the old growth and beautiful stuff. I mean, that's just some of my best memories are in nature there. And we could see Rainier very well from where we live. Of course, you can see it from a lot of places. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have so much exploring to do, and I'm really excited. It's such a different environment from what I'm used to, so it's cool.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, but it does tend to rain a bit, and I know that natives of Washington State don't use umbrellas. They prefer raincoats. But I was always very unfashionable, and I had an umbrella, so yeah. And I was transplant, so yeah.
I think Nadia, if I had an umbrella when we went out and it was raining, I think Nadia would beat me over the head with it. I think she would be like, I'm not going to be seen with you with an umbrella.
Yeah, because you would be so obviously not from there. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but I'm such a wimp with the rain. I mean, in Phoenix, when it rains, you're running for dear life. It's like a school day or a snow day. It's like you don't go to school, you don't do anything, you sit at home while it rains.
Yeah. I'm originally from Vermont, where if it snows, that's just normal. There's
Right.
people, it would take really quite a storm to have a snow day.
Mhm.
But here in New Jersey, it's like a couple inches and everyone's like, ah, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, schools close a lot more frequently around here. So,
Mm.
but yeah, so nothing wrong with having an umbrella. You just explain to people, hey, I grew up, in Arizona, so.
Yeah, yeah, it's I'm used to the dust storms,
Yeah, you guys try a dust storm sometime, yeah. So
yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, you have a lot of neat things to see there. A lot of neat things. It's a beautiful place, Washington
A
State.
lot of bookstores to explore. That I'm really excited to
Oh
do that.
yeah, neat. Yeah, and of course, Eastern Washington is an entirely different place. Once you go beyond the Cascades into Eastern Washington, I didn't spend a ton of time there, but I did go to Spokane and saw a bit of it. It's just a different landscape altogether. It's dry. It's really dry because the Cascades are a barrier. So that wetness is really just west of the Cascades.
Huh.
Yeah, it's more like I think there's a lot of agriculture out there in Eastern Washington. So it's like a different place. But yeah, it's a state with a lot of natural beauty. Just beautiful stuff. So kind of jealous actually that you're out there. But New Jersey has its charms too. So yeah.
I've never been. I need to.
Okay. Yeah, I live
visit
very close to New
East
York City, which it's pretty cool. I love New York City, but I also get overwhelmed by it. So it's just so much there. It's just overstimulating for me. But
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to New York City once when I was like a kid. So
okay.
I'm
Yeah.
dying to go back there with Nadia. She's never been there.
Okay. Wow.
but-
Well, let me know if you guys come out. I live, like an hour away from New York City. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll let you know. We'll do a we'll do a book haul video.
Nice. Yeah, we could do a bookstore tour video in New York City or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Neat. Yeah. Wow. So you're thinking about maybe after all these depressing books that you're going to read, maybe a Malazan read perhaps in your future, or is there anything definite, or do you tend to just sort of pick up what you feel inspired to pick up?
I'm really undisciplined with with that sort of thing. I'm very much of a mood reader.
Yeah.
I think I'll get better once I'm a little more distanced from having to read all these books for school. But I think I'll be a little more disciplined. But yeah, I mean, there are so many books that I just want to get started on right away.
Yeah.
And Malazan is right there up near the top. People are begging me to finish The Dark Tower.
Oh yeah, I'm actually reading right now Song of Susanna, book 6. Yeah.
I stopped halfway through Song of Susanna, and I don't know why, because I was really enjoying it.
Same here. I'm actually halfway through Song of Susanna, like right now. So
I think literally halfway I stopped, and that was like months and months ago. And I was really enjoying it. I was like, I don't know why I stopped.
So I was told by so many people that I was not going to like Song of Susanna, that maybe I just had these low expectations or whatever, but I'm loving this book. It's just, I think it's way more, and I loved every Dark Tower book so far, and each one has been different from the other. And this is a series that is just revels in its weirdness,
Yeah,
and I totally love that. I love that. And Song of Susanna is as weird as it gets. And I dig that. I'm enjoying that a lot. So that's sort of all the meta stuff going on, how self-referential it is. And it's spooky, crazy stuff that reminds me of this.
Well, no, sorry, but it's so true. Like, I love that self-referential stuff. And I feel like maybe that's because I'm reading it later. I'm not reading it when it was released. So maybe the people who were like, this is what The Dark Tower is, this is what we are expecting, were disappointed. But I knew all along, I knew there was like some meta stuff going on, especially at the end of it. So I was like, yes, bring on the, Salem's Lot references,
Yeah, bring on the weirdness. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, I love book 6 so far. I'm halfway through, but it's for me, I liked Wolves of the Call a lot.
Mhm.
But for
Yeah.
me, it was a bit of a, and of course it's very closely based on the Magnificent Seven, in
Yeah.
many ways. And there's that slow build up to that final confrontation kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, it was a little too slow for me, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this
I
one is like boom. I'm like on every page this is cool.
exactly. And I feel the same way. And like what I loved about the Dark Tower, especially like the drawing of the three and the wastelands, is that it was very atypical from a lot of fantasy. It was just like right to the point, in moving very fast and very weird. And then book 4,
Yeah,
Wizard in Glass,
Wizard and
was
Glass.
like total reverse. It was like
Yeah,
slow, slow, slow. And I
yeah.
really liked it. I
I
thought,
did too.
yeah, yeah. Like I don't know why I like book 4 more than book 5. Even though I like them both, but I do feel like I don't know why book 5 felt slower.
I think for me, the answer is that book 4 is a nearly perfect story. The story within the story
Hmm.
within the story. So there's the frame narrative, which is progressing a little bit toward the Dark Tower, but not very far. And then there's the story within the story. And there's even a, well, it's Romeo and Juliet, is what it is in so many ways. And he tells you that in the epigraph in the very beginning. He quotes from Romeo and Juliet. He often tells you what he's going to do. Stephen
Yeah.
King, he just tells you right out. And that was the last time they ever saw each other alive, and it's like, wait, why did you tell me this?
Yeah.
But somehow the dude pulls it off.
Yeah.
That's a writer.
Yeah.
The dude pulls it off because I'm still flipping the pages thinking, okay, how does this happen? So that may be a technique to pay attention to. Everyone yells about spoilers all the time. And my friend AP Canavan recently suggested that actually people enjoy a book more when they get spoiled because they want to know. And some people even will read the ending of a book before. I don't do this personally, but they'll read the ending of the book before they get there. And then they'll read the rest of the book to get to the ending.
Nadia does that. Yeah.
Okay, yes. My mother read a ton of romance novels, and she would always read the end and then go back and see how I got there.
Yeah.
But apparently there's research to suggest that you actually enhance your enjoyment of the book by doing that.
Really?
Yeah. So maybe those people are on to something.
Maybe, I guess that would kind of make sense. Your expectations are exactly where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how
Because
that
I think
works. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's usually when we're disappointed in a book. Mostly it's because our expectations were higher than what the book was going for.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Expectations are so key, because I've had a few experiences where people have really described, oh, this is the best book ever. It's my favorite book. And I was, oh, I guess I better read that. And I read it, I'm like, okay, it was okay. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't. And then I've had experiences like, Song of Susanna, where I expected it to be too weird or something. And I would just be like, oh, come on, Stephen King. And I'm loving it so far.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I don't know about, I feel this way with like all types of all art forms, where it's like when I hear universally, like, this is Bob Dylan's worst album, I'm like, I need to listen to that.
Yeah.
And I usually like it because it's like, well, when they say it's the worst, like it's usually there's something different about it, that I want to explore. Like, why is it giving people that reaction? Or movies too, it's like, oh, it's such a horrible movie, it's the worst movie in the series. I usually end up liking, I don't know, maybe it is a thing with expectations.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's just somebody being ahead of their time.
Yeah.
It's like with some of Beethoven's most profoundly moving pieces that he wrote near the end of his life when he was going deaf. People at the time were like, what? He's just gone nuts,
Yeah.
And now we recognize and if you listen to them, you think, what? This was the 19th century? And they're just so profoundly ahead of his time. I feel like that sometimes that's the case too, where a work a creative work is dismissed. And then only later, people realize how awesome it was. There are certain writers like that, like Kate Chopin, for example. I don't know if you've read any of her short stories, but she was a late 19th century author who was just way ahead of her time, wrote about marriage being a sort of inherently oppressive institution, and she was censored, so nobody really read anything of hers until like mid 20th century. And then everyone was like, whoa, she was brilliant,
Right.
So,
Yeah, I'm very drawn to that kind of phenomenon where artists are somehow, for some reason, just ahead of their time. And
yeah,
it's really interesting. And yeah, a lot of times, and who knows, maybe the stuff that we are criticizing and hating today and like pop culture and everything, it's going to be everyone's favorite. I mean, look at the Star Wars prequels. I feel like there's so many people are revisiting them and trying to say they're great. I think they're still terrible, but
it's interesting. I was just talking about them recently, and how the thing about them that I didn't like the most, and there are things about them that I do like, so I don't want to be, I don't want to, be mean to them or anything. But what I didn't like was how it felt to me like George Lucas, who is very revisionist anyway, but how he tried to push it into more science fiction, where I feel like what worked really well with Star Wars was that it is essentially fantasy dressed as science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And with stuff like the midichlorians and stuff like that he tried to introduce in the prequel, I just thought, you know what, dude, you're losing the magic. Literally, you're losing the magic. And that's a mistake here. You did really well when you were leaning on Joseph Campbell, and all that for the first trilogy, A Hero's Journey and all that, and then he tried to make it a little more sciencey. I don't know.
I think that's a weird example of something where the world building kind of dragged it down a little bit, almost like by the time they did the prequels, like, there's all of these books written about the lore and all, it's so developed and so massive. And then it's like, it's not this simple, like throwback to Flash Gordon, it's
right.
It's something, and almost that simplicity is, I think, what's missing with Star Wars today, probably.
Maybe. Yeah, I haven't. So I did watch the Disney films with Rey and all that gang, and I didn't hate them as much as I feel like a lot of people did, but I did feel that they were very derivative. Yeah. It was almost like Disney said, okay, people didn't like the prequels because you tried to do something a little different there, so let's just replicate what you did in the first. Okay, George Lucas was not part of it either, but they just said, let's replicate those first films. We'll have, instead of a Death Star, we'll have a Death Planet, and it just felt like almost beat for beat a kind of a bad imitation.
I mean, I think that's exactly it. And I feel like we're in that just kind of like, almost like just very reactive, just very going back and forth between, and these are massive companies that are just thinking about, their profits, of course, and what's going to be profitable. And they saw, well, everyone's hating the prequels because they were very different and weird and not like old Star Wars. So let's make old Star Wars. Right. And then you could even see it within the trilogy itself. It just wasn't unified. You saw The Force Awakens was basically A New Hope. And then the second one, they're like, okay, let's give this to this, very personal, creative artist who can make something different.
Right.
Okay, he did that. Let's stop that. People don't like that. Let's go back to fun Star Wars. That's too much, So it's just like, and I think that's maybe what people who are nostalgic for George Lucas's movies and like when he was directing and writing them, is that you could really feel like there is one person behind these decisions. They may not be good decisions, but there's a very clear like motivation, a very clear sense of purpose to them.
A vision.
Yeah, that's lacking in what we have now. Yeah,
I think you're spot on there. You're spot on. They're trying to go after what's popular and ended up with a jumbled mess, or what they thought would please the most people. And it didn't work out too well. But that is a thing that plagues a lot of industries today, including the publishing industry. I believe that they're just so scared because, you know, the internet has really done some great things for publishing, and it's really turned the traditional publishing industry on its head in many ways.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of reluctance to experiment. Like there used to be more, I feel like anyway, I mean, maybe somebody who's a real insider would disagree, but I feel like there used to be more courage to just take on a new author who's doing something different, but really good. And I feel like that's not enough today. They want somebody who's the next Harry Potter, you know, they want the next whatever was popular yesterday, you know, and in the process, or they want to go with a safe bet. So, you know, if somebody's famous, can publish a book because everybody knows that person and that'll sell a certain number of books. But I just feel like there's less risk taking, maybe. I don't know. I could be wrong, but where the risks are happening then would be in the self-publishing industry, where people are like, I want to write this, and they do it and they publish it. So
yeah. And well, I think that's probably a good point. I think that's a great point that you're making, which is like these two industries, especially publishing and film, have been rocked by huge, like, you know, existential threats, you know, to their existence. And it's like when you're at that stage and you can't really be making risks, especially like the film industry, you know, with like movie theaters shutting down with COVID and all that. Like,
oh my goodness, yeah.
I mean, you can feel like there's this terror, like, okay, what's gonna bring movies back, you know?
Yeah. And we might be at a point of, you know, profound change in that regard. I mean, when I look back and say, oh, what were we worried about? Or it might be, wow, that's when theaters died, you know?
Yeah.
And it would be sad to me, but at the same time, change happens, you know, and storytelling will go on in whatever form. There will be winners and losers in this, and then the changes, there always are, but storytelling will go on screens and in books, and that's a good thing. But I feel like we're in a very chaotic time, really.
Yeah, but a very creative time, you know. There's so many. I mean, look at this right now. I mean, YouTube, like, it's insane. All of these different social media platforms, ways that people are making. I mean, it seems like every day I'm finding some new YouTuber who's doing some kind of like profound and deep and like incredible work. That's just like, how is this not on, you know, TV right now? Yeah,
you're absolutely right. That's a great point. That this is a period of chaos, but what comes out of chaos is often creativity. And so people are doing some cool stuff as well. And a lot of it is very indie. So yeah, but things catch on. I mean, look at your channel. I mean, I don't know exactly, because I don't have a great sense of YouTube. I used to watch tennis highlights, was like my YouTube usage before I said to myself, hey, I think I'll start a YouTube channel about fantasy. I bet nobody's doing that, right? So yeah, I was quickly disabused of that notion. But I don't know much about, like, so you obviously do BookTube and you talk about books, but the kind of skits that you've done, is there a lot of that? I know there are a few people who do that on BookTube, but you've obviously been profoundly successful. Are there others out there you would say, oh yeah, these people are doing this really well, or are you just sort of pioneering this?
No, I'm not pioneering anything by any means, but I do feel like I joined BookTube because I was very aware of its existence. I think what makes your channel very original and refreshing is that
my ignorance.
Well, I mean, maybe you came into it with, you know, like, hey, I'm going to do this thing and this is how it's going to be done. And like, without that influence, I think it brings a lot of freshness to your channel, that people really love, an authenticity, which is huge, obviously, on the internet. For me, it was always like, I want to be making stuff. I know I want to be doing stuff on YouTube. I don't know where that path is going to take me, you know? And it's just been a huge learning process. You know, I had my inspirations, you know, of booktubers that I wanted to be like, and I thought, hey, you know what, maybe I'll just try this out. I love reading. This will be fun. And then you just kind of figure out what works for you. I realized that I couldn't keep up a schedule of reading all this while
So
doing
hard.
college and making videos. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think people maybe don't realize this. I know people don't realize this who don't do YouTube, but there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff that's going on for everything. And it takes a ton of time.
Well, I was going to say, yes, it takes a ton of time for me to read this fat book and then do a review of it or have a discussion. But I'm guessing from your videos that each one of those like 30-second or 1 minute or whatever, those shorter videos that you do, and you do longer ones too, but those short videos probably take you hours and hours of editing, I would guess. And you have to think up the concept and all of that. That's, am I right? I mean, or do you just like make it like that?
No, it does. I mean, it can take a while. I guess it depends on like where I'm at, like coming up with ideas wise, because it's constantly just like self-doubt, trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to be good, and what's going to be fun to make also. And then, the editing and the writing, sometimes it comes together really fast and I'm like, hey, 2 hours, boom, like there's my video. And sometimes I have to do it in 2 hours because I have a lot of, I have school or whatever to do. But now it's a little bit better and I can focus more time on it. But yeah, I mean, it can take some time. But the reason I started doing the skits was because, I saw others on BookTube doing it, like Daniel, and, there were, stuff going on here and there. And I'm like, that seems fun. And I think that that just appealed to me, more and was just more fun for me to make. And people also wanted to watch those more. So I'm like, if it's fun for me to do and people like watching it, I'm just going to keep doing it. And that's kind of where the channel's at right now.
That's really cool. Yeah. I got a skit for you. A good idea. Although, I mean, you could just nod and say, yeah, that's nice. But it would have been perfect maybe a year ago. So maybe it's stale now, but it would have been perfect a year ago. So here it is. So you made these really, some of my favorites of yours are the Zoom ones with the professor, the sort of befuddled professor. And I've several times during COVID, especially when we had to do, I normally teach online asynchronously, in other words, not through Zoom. But when COVID happened, everything went online and we had to have our face-to-face classes went onto Zoom essentially. Right. So, but so many times, as students turn off their cameras and that sort of thing. And so you're like, what are they doing? Are they listening to me? Are they taking a shower or whatever? But almost like, I'd say every week, there was one student who at the end of class, who had their camera off the entire time. Everybody says, bye, thank you, professor. And then even the ones who had their cameras off, they would leave. And I'd be the only one there. And this one student was still there. Yeah. And I would be like, okay, Susie, we're done now. You can go. And there was just this icon there sitting there. I'm thinking, she wasn't listening to me, was she?
That's the tell. That's the curse. Yeah. I mean, that's a very good idea.
I think you could use something like that, right? I mean, or maybe a year ago, it would have been more applicable, but yeah.
That's the thing. It's like I don't know how many people are doing. So, I mean, I imagine there's still so many who are doing Zoom classes, but yeah, that is very true. And almost definitely Susie in that situation is sleeping for sure.
Oh yeah. She fell asleep. Not because of the profundity of my interpretation of Beowulf, but probably because she was just, working late hours or something like that, right?
Of course. I mean, there's something like, I don't know what it is, but it truly is like harder to focus on Zoom. I don't know why. I mean, I'm sure just not having that immediacy is just really, really.
Oh, it's so true. From a professor perspective, it's so much harder to have a meaningful, dynamic discussion when you have 20 people, 30 people in a Zoom meeting, and 3/4 of them have their cameras off, and you're thinking they're not listening to the thing I'm saying. And maybe that would be the case in a classroom. Maybe this has been a wake-up call. If you're in a classroom, and some of the people in the back are like, oh, those are the ones on Zoom with their cameras off,
Yeah.
but it's harder to do that. And I do feel like it's more engaging when you're in a classroom. There's a magic in the air when you get a good discussion going, and it's just, it's what I get up in the morning for as a teacher. I loved that. And it was something I missed during the pandemic was that dynamic discussion. And I learned from it. That's the great thing about teaching is I'm constantly learning from my students. So that's what keeps me young, theoretically. So, yeah.
Well, I actually have a question for you, and I don't know if you care about talking about it, but are any of your students aware of your alter ego? Yeah.
Yeah, some have. I had one a few months ago who suddenly appeared in my comments. I can't remember what video, but it was like, "Hey, Dr. Chase," and it was like, I knew the guy. He was a great student that I had known probably like 5 years prior. And I remembered him, and he was just so astounded to find me on the internet because he had been having an argument with his girlfriend about fantasy and the literary worth of fantasy. So he went on YouTube to prove to her that there's some literary value in fantasy, and came across one of my videos, because that's my whole shtick really, is I'm here to explore fantasy in a very, literary way. And it is worthy of critical exploration. That's the whole premise of my channel. So yeah, he came across it. It was so sweet how he wrote to me, and then he wrote to because he knew my work email as well. And so we had an exchange there. But there are some students who were my students when I started the channel and subscribed to it as well. And I have colleagues who are subscribers too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, and family members and that sort of thing, but they tend to be very quiet. I don't get comments so much from colleagues and family members. It's really more the people who are really into fantasy. Some of them I'm pretty sure are just being nice to me, but subscribing. Let's help this poor crazy guy out a little bit. So,
I mean, that's how I feel about like my channel, and there are, whenever someone who's like not of the internet finds it, it's always really strange.
Yeah, you had that experience, right?
Like, what?
Do you had that experience, which I think you talked about, where I
had that experience in class.
Yeah.
And I'm a very I'm a pretty quiet and like reserved person, in reality, and I feel like people, when they find it, they just kind of look at me. They're just kind of like, "Who the hell are you?"
Yeah. It's funny because I think in some ways you do put on a persona when you do this sort of thing, right? I mean, we have to do certain things to make our videos more interesting. If we were to just talk the way we always talk, we would feel a little bit dead, I think. It would feel a little bit lethargic, perhaps. So I do think that we have a tendency to be a little more lively when we're having discussions, maybe gesture a little more and that sort of thing. But other than that, I certainly don't self-consciously do anything different than I would in the real world, And I did have the interesting experience of meeting some of my friends that I've made on this platform. I went to a conference in Florida that's fantasy oriented. It's an academic conference, but a few of us showed up there. So it was me and AP Canavan, who's been going to this academic conference for years and years and years, and he himself has a PhD in fantasy narratology. So I mean, these are serious scholars and all that. So that all is going on, but there are also authors at this conference who are interested in this side of, I guess, storytelling, the more academic side. But I went there because I wanted to meet AP, and also I had the really wonderful experience of meeting. It was Jimmy from the Fantasy Network, whom you've talked to, and Joanna and Alan as well, and met some authors there too, which was really cool. Stephen Erickson was there. And also Stephen Donaldson from the Thomas Covenant series.
Oh, I love the Gap Cycle.
Yep. and Jenny Wirtz, whose books I'm reading now.
Mm.
So it was really a wonderful experience. But I'll tell you, it was a little surreal for the first like 30 seconds to minute. Like I went into the hotel and I saw AP and Steven Erickson together. And then Jimmy was simultaneously there. And it was just like, oh, you're real, you know? So it was a bit surreal for a bit. And then it was just very natural after that. And Alan and Joanna came later. And it was just very cool because we're all there because we have these passions. Mm-hmm. So we had lots to talk about in person as well. I mean, it was a lot of the same stuff that we do online, really, but it just felt very natural after a bit.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really great. I mean, I don't think I've met anyone. Hold on, let me think.
Yeah, have you met anyone from YouTube in real life?
No.
Huh.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've talked to plenty of people, but yeah, I don't know. I really want to get out there and talk to people, but
yeah, wouldn't it be cool if we could have like a YouTuber or BookTuber conference where we could all go? And I feel like that would be a fun thing. Somebody would have to organize it, obviously, but
I mean, I think that would be great. And I honestly it's really interesting how the writing community and the BookTube community, it's like becoming one. And I love how Steven Erickson is so engaged with, YouTube and creators and all that. Like, that's fantastic. Same with Brandon Sanderson, same with a lot of writers, because I feel like there's the sense like, hey, this is the future. This is how people are finding out about books. This is how people are reading more, like I get so many comments where it makes me very happy when people are like, hey, I was watching your skits and just funny videos and stuff, and now I'm reading Moby Dick. Like, I'm like, okay. Like, that's awesome. But I mean, I'm curious about you as a writer yourself, how you feel like the business of YouTube and the business of writing kind of comes together.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So my feeling is this, and I know there are some people out there who disagree with me, and I'm cool with that, and I would never tell them they're wrong for running their channels the way they want. I think that's great. Some people don't want authors to interact with them on their channels, and that's cool. I have no problem with that. But I personally, this is a passion for me, and I cannot separate it from my passion for teaching. I cannot separate it from my passion for writing. These things all bleed into one another, and I cannot just take a knife and separate them.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel. And I love talking to authors. I feel like that's a huge learning opportunity for me to have these discussions, and even for an author to engage with me after I've read their book and reviewed it is wonderful, and it's never been anything but positive for me. When it's happened, even though sometimes I will say things that are maybe slightly critical about their writing, I tried in my own reviews, and again, this is my style, and people do what they want to do differently, and I'm cool with that. But my style is to imagine that the writer is in the room with me while I'm talking about their book, and to speak in that way. I try to ensure that I'm being respectful about whatever I say. I want to be analytical. I want to try to describe what works really well in this book. And there's always something positive to say, really. But I also can be critical and say things that I feel like this could be better, But for me, imagining that the author is there is just how I do it. And once in a while, the author appears, and it's cool. It's really, for me, enriching. It always has been anyway. Nobody's come to me and said, "You jerk, how could you say that about my book?" Or anything like that. So, but no, it's for me, I cannot separate these things. I learn from being on BookTube, and I learn in my classroom, and I learn while I'm writing, and all of them feed each other. And I just don't know how to separate them. And that's how I've operated.
I feel the same way. And I think that's a healthy attitude to have, because I feel like I personally feel like it's impossible to separate those things. It all bleeds together, and to try to pretend like it doesn't is, for me, a little disingenuous, because you can't really do that with your passions. At least I can't. And with reviewing books, I think what you said I think that's a great way to look at it. And also, as like a teacher yourself, I'm sure you have a lot of experience being gentle and critical and constructive with your criticism. Like I'm sure that's the majority of what you have to do. I mean, it's
True.
I think that's a great thing to do. And kind of a lot of times we want to just, and it's also just more interesting, because to just say like, oh, this is bad, they didn't do this right, I don't like this. I've come to accept that most of my opinions about anything about art, it's mostly subjective. Like, it's mostly like founded on my personal taste, the way I grew up, the culture I was a part of, the types of stories I'm used to consuming. That to just put a blanket statement of this is bad, this is not how it's supposed to be done, it's kind of just irresponsible in a lot of ways.
Yeah, well, you're an English major, so I think you understand that you can, and by the way, this is perfectly fine too. There's a place for this, but just to give your emotional reaction to a read, it's great. People like to watch that. People are interested. This book made me really happy. This book made me feel sad, or I didn't like this book, or whatever. That's fine. But I think there's another thing you can do, which is not as subjective, which is to try to pick apart a story and say, okay, this is why this works. Here's how this scene works. Or this is a bit of foreshadowing, here, and this comes up later here. That's not subjective. That is a technique that the author is using that you can analyze and say, I like how this worked. Yeah, that's subjective. But to just identify the technique, or like I was talking about Abercrombie earlier, how he will replicate the POV's voice in the narrative voice. That's just that's a technique that you can identify. That's not me saying I like this or I don't like this or anything. I'm just saying this is a technique. I recognize his use of it here. And I do think he pulled it off really well. For me, it enriched the reading experience. So there is some objectivity mixed in, a big dose of it, really. And I think as an English major, you have some training already in how to do that, how to bring that objectivity to your assessment, to your analysis, which isn't going to be purely emotional or subjective.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all about bringing evidence to the table and backing up your evidence. And I mean, I feel like with the Wheel of Time video essay I did, I wanted to do exactly what you were saying of, pick apart why exactly it was like this. I had this emotional reaction.
Talking about the show now, right? The one you did
the
on
show.
The
show. Yeah. I did a video essay on the shows, like over an hour long.
And why it didn't work.
Yeah. And just like looking at the narrative choices and trying to see like, okay, while this may be enjoyable and this works for you and you're able to enjoy it, like, this is why I think, these story elements weren't going well,
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think that's the way to go about it. And, I watched the show and I talked about it with AP. We had we switched channels for every episode or so. And there were some things that I thought they did well. And it's okay to talk about that too. And sometimes people don't want to hear that because they just feel like there's this big emotional negative reaction to it. But there are plenty of things to pick apart as well. That I felt like as somebody who had read the series once and likes the series, I consider myself a fan of the Wheel of Time series. Not maybe a mega fan. I've only read it once, but I do like it. But I was kind of cool with some of the decisions they made in episodes 4, 5, 6, 7, where they strayed pretty far from the source material. For example, the episode where they had the warder, who spoiler for Wheel of Time show here, but the warder who lost his Aes Sedai and went through all that terrible stuff, and what happened at the end of the show, it was not part of the series, the book series. They took that in from, I think there may be a reference to that in the prequel or something, if I remember correctly, or something. But anyway, it's not part of the book series proper. And a lot of people got upset about that. I thought it was a great way, an economical way, in a show that has to take 14 massive books and in a few seasons with only 8 episodes, somehow condense that. I thought it was a great way to portray the relationship between an Aes Sedai and her warder, which is profoundly important in the series. I liked that. I thought it was good storytelling. It was very different from the books. But I thought it was good storytelling. So I liked what they did in those 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I didn't like episodes 1 through 2 and 3 so much, and I thought 8 was a train wreck. But
I think that's where most people agree.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees about episode 8.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I think that it's very hard to talk about the Wheel of Time in a nuanced way because there are such competing forces and a lot of there's a lot of negativity surrounding it. And I feel like people like when Daniel Green talks about the show and he says that it can be hard because to have to say hey, this works, this doesn't, it's not terrible. I don't think it's a terrible show, I have my issues with it, but to be able to just not say, hey, it's garbage, just burn it, that's I think that's a good thing to do. I didn't follow his coverage of the show very closely, so I know that he is, of course, he's a mega fan, right? I mean, that's a series that is central to him, I think. And I think that's still the case. I've watched some of his Wheel of Time videos, and he's very knowledgeable about the series. He's read it multiple times. So how was he, would you say? I mean, I don't want you to speak for him, but was he largely okay with the show, or what was his take on it? I think that he had a very mixed opinion from what I could tell. Okay. I thought he thought like you, they did things well, they did things not so well. And there were those who are diehard fans of the book series who are hey, they changed stuff that's not allowed, they ruined it. And I think that Daniel went in going with, well, they're going to have to change stuff, it's not going to be the same, like you just have to accept that with any adaptation. But also there were those who were hey, this is great. Also, there are maybe a lot of toxic people who are not acting in good faith, politically, or have certain motivations which are very detrimental to, I think, the fandom.
That got mixed in there too.
So it's really unfortunate, and it becomes kind of like a good versus evil battle when we're talking about a TV show.
I think too there were just some and I didn't object at all when AP and I were covering the show on our channel and trying to do it in the way where we were being as objective as we could. And we had some people who clearly just came to vent, okay.
What side are you on?
Yeah. I mean, they were clearly very just emotionally invested in the book series, deeply invested in it, and didn't want to hear anything positive about the show at all. And I get that. I'm attached to my books too and my series, and I'm sure I would be tempted to, if someone, for example, were to adapt Lord of the Rings or Malazan or one of my favorites in a way that I felt was disrespectful, then I would have a hard time keeping my objectivity, I'm sure. So, yeah.
Well, that might be an interesting thing coming up with the new Rings of Power series, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep an open mind. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. From the little bit that I paid attention to, and I'm going to watch the show. I'm gonna check it out.
I'm interested to see your opinion.
Yeah. I like you, I believe that an adaptation cannot be uber faithful they shouldn't treat the book as a script for the show. It won't work. You cannot. It's a different medium. So you have to do things that are different. In a way, I feel like they're probably going to be creating a lot of the actual storyline from very bare material. That's my understanding, and so there's some freedom in that. Like with the new, I forget what they're calling the new Game of Thrones show, but the prequel show, they're basing that on Fire and
Blood, right?
Is the book. I read the book.
Fire and Blood, I think.
Yeah, I think it's Fire and Blood. It's Blood and Fire and Blood, one or the other. But anyway, it's a very dry pseudo historical manuscript is what it is. George Martin was having a bit of fun, doing some world building, but it's very bare. And so that's going to be great for the show because they can adapt from that very spare material, and nobody's going to say, you ruined my favorite character and blah, blah, because they're not very fleshed out in the source material. So they're less likely to get that kind of blowback, I think. So it could, I feel like that Tolkien fans, a lot of Tolkien fans are very, what's a good word to use here?
Intense.
They can be, but very protective right. of Tolkien's, of their source material. So I would not want to be a showrunner doing this. I wouldn't want to be. I'm interested to see what they come up with. I'm going to treat it as, based on the world that Tolkien created, and that somebody's doing a creative spin on that. That's kind of how I approached Wheel of Time. But we'll see. I don't know. Are you going to watch both of those shows?
Oh, I think I'll have to. I mean, I have no real concern. I mean, I feel very much not too like protective or attached to the source material, and I can't really think of anything that I would be too crazy about the adaptation, just because I always feel like it's going to be different from the books no matter what. I still have the books. I can still read the books.
Yes. I mean, nobody's going into your room and stealing the books off your shelf and burning them, right? So.
Thank God. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So, wow. Yeah. Well, we'll see. I know people are going to be upset, and,
And a lot of it is, it gets caught up in the culture and the, unfortunately, politics, and it just
these days everything does. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's just a machine of controversy and new adaptations, and disrespecting the source material and blah 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 blah. That I feel like I've seen it happen to so many fandoms and so many series or works, that it's just, you forget that these are just stories. We could do what we want with them. It becomes repetitive. It's just like, okay, I get it. There's the group that they want them to be super faithful. There's the group that's, just like mad about, how it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, as a fantasy fan, I'm rooting for every single show that is fantasy based. I want them to succeed. Mm-hmm. I want them to do well. So I'm rooting for them all.
Yeah.
That said, I'll be critical if I think something is not done well, But what about you? If you had the chance to adapt any series out there, what would you like to work on?
Stormlight. I mean, I feel like that's such an easy answer for me, because I do feel like the way the Stormlight Archive has been written, it's perfect for a TV show.
It's very visual. Yeah.
It's very visual. It's got those strong character moments, those, it would be fantastic, I think, if done the right way. And the plot structure works for like a whole season. Like, you finish reading The Way of Kings and it's like, you feel like you watched a series, one season of television. So, I think, that would be that. Yeah. I
almost think you'd need 2 seasons for those books, for each of the books. But yeah,
maybe I don't know.
You would have a better sense of than I would, because I've never really looked closely at screenplays and that sort of thing. But you'd have to, if you did it in one season, you'd have to leave out a lot, right?
For sure. I mean, yeah, you'd have to leave out a lot, which might be, okay. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think the basic story and the main characters, they're really solid, and I think they would work really well on in TV. So
Yeah.
One day, hopefully, that'd be nice.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not if, it's when the Stormlight Archive gets adapted.
Probably. I mean, they're already so huge. Like they're and it's not even like halfway through being done with the series written,
No. Well, the first arc, I guess you could say, is nearly there. There's only the fifth book, but yeah, it's 10 books, really, isn't it? So yeah, I have to catch up. I only read the first 3. So naughty me, I keep kicking the Rhythm of War down the road. I haven't read it yet.
Me too. I haven't read Rhythm of War yet.
Oh, so I'm in good company. Do you realize how many things we have in common here?
we both haven't read Rhythm of War. Like,
yeah,
I feel like with Rhythm of War, I read Oathbringer like right before it came out, so I was a little bit like, I need a break,
Yep, they're big books.
And now it's like with the 5th one coming up, I'm like, I don't want to read Rhythm of War too early. It'd be all excited for so.
That's my plan right now, is to read Rhythm of War before book 5, like a couple months. Yeah. I meant it all along, actually. That's what I was going to do. Yeah. I didn't break my TBR like 5 times in a row. No.
Are you pretty strict with your TBR? You like really? No.
I'm actually, when I do a TBR video, which I will do, it's one of the BookTube customs that I learned. I do a seasonal TBR, so for a year. And I always say at the beginning, this is my highly aspirational seasonal TBR, so that people from the beginning know, and my viewers know, I usually don't get to all the books that I want to read. So I'm like a kid in a candy store with very big eyes. And, I have a job, and I'm trying to write, and I have a family, and I play tennis, and, there's all this stuff in the way. So, yeah.
Of course, the family get in the way of reading books,
Yeah. I don't have to walk the dog. She can hold her pee, Got books to read,
Exactly. Yeah. That's priorities. I mean, I'm with you on that. I'm too eager to read all these books, and I'm always finding new books, and I love discovering new writers and all that. So it's always just like jumping to the next thing. And I have a horrible habit of just dropping books in the middle of reading them to read something else. And that's like, I have to stop doing that.
Yeah, that I cannot do. I'm a little bit more, so I'm far more likely to DNF a series than I am a book. Even if I'm hating a book, there's this thing in me it's pretty stupid, actually. I wish I were different, but I have to finish the book. I just feel like maybe it gets better at the end, or I don't know what, but I just feel like I can't put it down until I at least given the book a whole read. And then if I didn't like that book, I will not continue in a series. But yeah, so I'm pretty bad at that.
But I feel like that's pretty good. That's more disciplined than I am, where even if I'm enjoying a book, I'll just be like, yeah, I've had enough. I'm good. I don't need to finish it. There's something else I want to read. Like, I don't know why, but a book, I have to, I don't know, like if I get a sense of like, I know where the book is going, I kind of have an idea of what's going to happen, then I'll put it aside a lot of times. But
well, I'll be interested to see if you do finish Song of Susanna.
I will. People will kill me if I don't. There's like, I've been getting more and more comments lately about the Dark Tower for some reason too. They're like, hey, are you going to finish the Dark Tower? Where's the rest of the Dark Tower videos? I'm like,
interesting.
I better read those.
Interesting. Well, if you want to talk about it with me, I'm definitely game for that too.
Absolutely. I'd love that.
You know what I've been getting a lot of comments on lately?
What?
I find very interesting. A lot of people are interested in seeing me read manga. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
particularly what is it called?
One
One
Piece,
Piece.
Berserk. Yeah.
One Piece, Berserk, and Vinland Saga are the ones most commonly
Uh,
recommended. So,
yeah. Yeah.
have you read manga at all?
No, no. And I'm waiting for the day where they come knocking at my door, like,
Huh.
you better start reading because but I mean, I was actually talking to Daniel the other day about this, where he's like, a lot of Berserk, One Piece, a lot of these are going around in BookTube. There's a lot of pressure on booktubers to start reading them because
Yeah.
people are it's almost like there's a crossover between this like manga world, the BookTube world, and it's like finally meeting.
Yeah.
And it's really unique and really fun. And I'm excited. I'll definitely read. I think I want to read One Piece soon, maybe, and get
Okay.
started on that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll give it a try. I'm open to all kinds of things. I grew up on comics, so
Mhm.
American comics, like Marvel comics and that sort of thing, back in the late '70s, early to mid '80s. I know manga's different, there are different things, but I'm a firm believer that you can tell great stories in graphic novels and that sort of thing. So I'm interested to give it a shot, and
Yeah.
see. I can't promise to anyone that manga is something that I would cover extensively on my channel, but
Mhm.
I'm definitely curious, and I
Yeah.
want to try maybe those three, because those are the ones that people are always recommending. So I figure, well, let's see what they're like, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the perfect attitude to have about it. I mean, that's how I feel. And also I'm like eager, like, oh, it's something new. I want to try something new. So
Yeah, yeah. There's that too. Yeah, I'm sure there's some good storytelling that happens in that medium. Absolutely. Yeah. So cool. Well, I don't want to hog too much of your time. This has been a ton of fun for me, getting to talk to you and discovering we had like 7 things in common that I didn't know about. So that was really cool. But just really great to, I appreciate so much you coming here and taking the time to chat with me. And I really mean it. If you ever do want to talk about Malazan or Dark Tower or any of that other stuff, or One Piece.
yeah. Hey.
I mean, I'm game. So, bring it on, but it's really fun. And I really appreciate you doing this. And thank you for your channel and for giving me some really good laughs. It was a difficult time in many ways, the pandemic and everything. And you were doing stuff that maybe look back on it and think, okay, this is worth laughing about now, so, I appreciate that very much.
Well, thanks. And thank you so much for having me on. I was really happy we got to do this, and I'm amazed, the 2 hours flew by. So
Yeah.
I really am, yeah, I'm grateful for your channel. I love what you do, talking seriously about fantasy and spreading it, fantasy for all sorts of new readers. And
Hope so.
and I've discovered stuff on your channel, and I definitely, when I finish the Dark Tower and when I start Malazan, I'll be emailing you. I'll let you know.
Awesome. Yeah, you know where to find me. So, all right. Well, thank you everyone out there who has been watching. And I'm pretty sure you all know about Jake's channel, Man Carrying Thing. But in case you're like one of my 2 subscribers, hey, Dad, who doesn't know about his channel, I encourage you to check it out. He does some really great stuff, stuff that will lift you up, and some stuff that will make you think as well. So thank you so much, Jake, and bye everyone. Till next time.